Wendy's old van pulled up at the cottage of Cuthbert, formerly known as Jake, and we all piled out. Jeff was going to stay with his dad for a while, and Wendy was going to drop me at Mum's house. I was flying back to Greece in a few days. It was time to say goodbye, not knowing whether I would ever see Jake again. I felt the pain of parting, naturally, but I marvelled at the alchemy which God had wrought among us in a few short days. Misunderstanding, resentment, pain, all had been transformed into harmony. I took a good look at my old friend, and had the impression a certain rigidity had dissolved, in both body and soul. He returned my intent gaze. This has been a crazy few days, Mark. Like a kind of explosion, but where all the bits land in order. Yes, we must do it again sometime soon, I laughed. But seriously, why don't you and Jeff come visit me on the island? The young lad jumped in right away. That'd be amazing, Dad. Let's do it. Aye, well, we'll see how it goes, son, Cuthbert said hesitantly. I sensed his reluctance and changed the subject. Keep up with your studies, Jeff. I pray you get into the college. Let me know. Thanks, Mark. Uncle Mark, okay? As we agreed, Jeff, for sure. As Wendy's van rattled across the yard, I waved out of the window to father and son. Yes, father and son. That was the right way. The love and care Jake had given to Jeff had earned him that title. I gladly accepted the role of interesting but unreliable uncle. Thanks for dropping me in town, Wendy. Oh, it's nothing, man. Davy's supposed to be turning up tomorrow. He's going to need some help. I don't think he's got anywhere to stay. We're offering to put him up at our place for a bit. His wife left him and she took the house. He's had quite a trip by all accounts, walked most of the way back from India. What's the story about this near-death experience? Some say he's a bit crazy. Not a bit of it. I've spoken to him on the phone a few times. He's sound. The army did all the tests and found nothing wrong with his mind. He is different, though. Well, you would be after something like that, wouldn't you? Ah, you would. Give me a call if he turns up. I'd like to meet him. Will do, Mark. We sat in silence for a while before she spoke up. It's amazing how this has all worked out, Mark. Tanya would be happy with the solution. I nodded. After a while, she continued hesitantly. Can you keep it secret? I don't want Jake or Jeff to know this. I think it would really hurt them. Yes, of course. Wendy sighed, composing herself and looking for the right words. It was like this, Mark. That night you walked into Haymarket. Everyone was very drunk. Jake was buying drinks all round. It was like a frenzy in there. Somehow Tanya ended up on his knee. You have to understand, she didn't mean anything by it. She was very upset by your not answering the door to her. She knew you were in your flat. She had a few drinks too many. Maybe she was flirting with Jake. Maybe it was not right, fair enough. But when you ran out to the pub, she ran after you to try and explain and put it all right. She went all over the town. She went to your flat. You weren't there. She even went up Cow Hill looking for you. Over the next few days, she went round to your flat several times, but you were never in. She didn't know if you were really out or just not answering. It was the days before mobile phones, of course, and you didn't have a landline. Then she heard you disappeared to London. She was very hurt that you didn't even say goodbye to her. Jake was chasing her, but she was pushing him back, still hoping you would turn up. And a few weeks later, she found out she was pregnant with your baby. She kept phoning the house where you and Bob were staying, but nobody was picking up. Eventually, she got hold of Bob, who told her you were unreachable in India. She was in an impossible situation, Mark. She wanted to do what was best for the baby and put her own wishes to the side. She wanted the bairn to have a father, of course. She felt the best chance was maybe to accept Jake's advances and tell him it was his child. All the bits of me which had been ripped apart and then stitched back together again so many times on this trip fell apart once more. The whole edifice I constructed these years once more collapsed, and this time even the foundations were destroyed. Wendy continued. She considered having an abortion, but her mum Ruth begged her not to. Ruth revealed that Tanya had been conceived out of wedlock, and that she had been under pressure to terminate the pregnancy. Ruth told her that she had never regretted the decision for a moment, despite the difficulties in her marriage. She told Tanya that she was the joy of her life, just as her child would be to her. After much agonizing, Tanya accepted Jake's advances, and soon after told him she was expecting his baby. She was sounding him out. If he didn't want to take care of it, she might have still had the abortion. But Jake was excited by the news, to everyone's surprise. Probably his unrealistic nature. He had no idea how hard raising a child is. So that was it. Jake found out much later that Jeff was not his biological son, but by that time he loved Jeff so much, and Tanya too. So, bless him, he continued as Jeff's dad. Wendy sighed again. That's it. That's the story. That's how it was. I think you had to hear her side at last. I plunged to yet lower depths in my own estimation. Why had I read so much into Tanya sitting on Jake's lap? It was just part of a drunken, riotous evening. Tanya was not perfect, like the rest of us, but she was innocent of any serious misdemeanour. I was certainly less innocent, having rushed to judge her, and to make it worse, I'd ran off without giving her a chance to explain, or even the opportunity for a proper goodbye. I struggled for words. What can I say? I'm a complete idiot, aren't I? I'm shocked. Wendy did not deny my idiocy. She had never been one for polite niceties. At least she found a few kind words. Well, we all did a lot of daft things back then, didn't we? Daft hardly begins to cover it, Wendy, for my part. I feel so bad for judging her like that. Not for the first time on this visit, I had to wipe the tears from my cheek. The enormity of what had happened hung there in the silence as the van bumped along. It struck me then that life without God was like that, going over a potholed road in a van with no suspension. It hurt all the more that while I had been able to make peace with Cuthbert and Jeff, it was too late to make amends with Tanya. I saw her dashing around the pubs, searching for me, a look of panic in those moist green eyes. She'd even gone up Cow Hill in the dark. I saw her lying there on the top in my special place, weeping. The words from the Song of Songs came to me. I sought him whom I love. I sought, but did not find him. I arose and roamed the city streets and squares, and sought him whom I love. I sought, but did not find him. The watchmen who guard the city saw me, and I asked, "Have you seen him whom I love?" They could not help me. It was an evening flight home. I looked out of the window and saw the lights of Newcastle floating amidst the darkness. I could just make out the Tyne, a dark, meandering path, navigating its way home to the vast North Sea. I could even make out the bridges by their lights, especially the parabola of the Tyne Bridge. My first meeting with Jeff by the river came to mind, and I smiled at the thought that we would build our relationship over the coming years, God willing. I thought to turn to what kind of conversation I would have with the elder, and I tried to put them in some kind of order. I reflected on the many idols I had worshipped in my life in place of God, and made a list in my diary. 1. Secret agents, the hidden battle between light and dark. 2. Football, standing outside myself, connecting with something larger, loyalty to the tribe and the security which came from that. 3. Socialism, the creation of utopia here on earth, putting faith in the ability of the state to bring us happiness, putting one's own self-interest to one side in favour of the collective. 4. The tribe of heavies, another attempt to transcend the narrow self through the group. 5. Philosophy, the attempt to find ultimate meaning through our own logic. 6. Eastern religion, the attempt to dissolve the self into the one. Looking over the list, my perspective suddenly flipped 180 degrees. I suddenly saw these stages of my life not as a series of idols to be ditched, but as necessary steps on the ladder. I saw that it had been necessary to climb each step in turn, and that going directly from pure ignorance to enlightenment in one step is impossible. I saw that each step had been a preparation, a learning to walk. One must walk each step and take what is positive there, while seeing what is lacking. For example, one recognizes the desire to transcend the narrow self, while seeing that Newcastle United or socialism cannot take one all the way there. One gains insight at each step, while recognizing it is only a step. The steps do not stop us getting to God. They take us there, as long as we see them as steps. I thought of Jeff and his art, a wholly worthy attempt to capture something, and yet something must necessarily remain out of the reach of art. Art can become an idol in itself apart from God, but seen in the right way, it can show us that there is always something beyond our ability to grasp. By its very limitation, it gives us a glimpse of what is beyond limitation, the divine source. And what of love? If we take human love as the final goal of humanity, it is indeed an idol. To think another human being can bring us ultimate fulfillment is delusion. But if we see it right, human love can prepare us for God's love. Indeed, human love is perfected in God's love. My first love for my northern friends was, I now saw, corrupted because it had existed apart from God. It seemed to me that my second attempt on this trip had come closer because God had been there in the mix. I sighed at the thought that there would be no second attempt with Tanya. I think that concludes the account of my trip to see Cuthbert. formerly known as Jake. As you asked, I have left nothing out and told it just as it came to me. I'll just say a few words to finish, if I may. 4 years passed. Jeff completed his studies and was doing well selling his wood sculptures. He had stayed in London and had been seeing a lovely girl called Judith for about a year, a landscape painter. I knew the two were well suited when one of his letters mentioned a 2-hour conversation they had held about the quality of grain in different types of wood. Jeff would visit our island each year for a few weeks at a time, although the trip was too much for Cuthbert to consider. He would talk animatedly about how his dad had found a new lease of life working for a charity, driving the elderly and disabled around. Then one day a parcel arrived. I unwrapped it carefully, the bubble wrap suggesting something delicate. Then I came to a tough cardboard box. Then a wooden cormorant, about a foot high. I was taken aback by the finesse of the carving. Jeff really had captured the grace of its neck and the innocence in its eyes. I marvelled that such an expression could be hewed out of a block of wood. There was a letter. Dear Uncle Mark, Dad has died. He was very peaceful in his cottage, which is very nice by then. He actually painted the whole row of cottages last year. He fixed up the windows, got some new lamps and some new furniture. He was surrounded by his friends, his family and his icons. He refused to go into hospital. He knew it was his time and was grateful for the extension he had already had. Despite his pain, he carried on helping people right up to the end. I can still see him whizzing old Mrs. Wilkins around the supermarket in a wheelchair, the pair of them laughing like hyenas. We saw how his baptism changed him, gave him a new lease of life. We even wondered if his cancer was cured, but it was not to be. Still, he smashed the doctor's predictions. I know you'll want to come to his funeral. It will be on March the 20th, St. Cuthbert's Day, and Father Aaron will take it. You know how much he and Dad loved each other. Dad is being buried in the Woodland Cemetery up near Alston, in the same plot as Tanya. They will plant a rowan tree on the spot. I know you wanted to visit Tanya's grave there, so this will be your chance. The very last thing he said was, "Tell Mark I love him. I'm sorry for all of it. I'm so grateful to him." So please continue to pray for us, Mark. I will see you soon. Love, Jeff. P.S. I hope you like the cormorant. Whenever I see them, I remember our first meeting. I put my head in my arms and wept until the sleeve of my habit was soaked through. Epilogue. Thank you, Brother Mark, said the elder of Elason. You have spoken well. Cuthbert will arrive soon. He opened a drawer in his desk, withdrew a small white stone, and handed it to Mark. You will sit next to Cuthbert in the dining hall, and place this in his pocket. His dream was given to him for reasons I will not now go into. You will not say anything to him. Tanya is ready to play her part. But Elder, that was also very long ago. Cuthbert died many decades before me, and I have been here for, well, I don't know how long, Seems like thousands of years. As you know, my son, time flows differently here. Or rather, it does not flow at all. We will continue our conversation next time. Now you must go to the dining hall. Brother Mark asked for the elder's blessing and walked to the door, gripping the white stone tightly.